Today we're going to be talking about leaves, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a cross section of a leaf. So when I draw this, I'm going to draw the upper surface here and the lower surface here, and you're going to be looking at this leaf from the side. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw a cross section of a dicot leaf. Draw the structures, we're going to label them, and talk about the functions. Now a leaf is an organ, it's a plant organ. And just like we have a heart and a liver and a pancreas and so on, plants also have organs that carry out particular functions. Like the roots carry out transport of water and minerals. And the stem offers support and helps prop the leaves up high up in the air so we don't get shaded out by another plant. And finally the leaves. The leaves are the major photosynthetic organ of a plant. That's where your chloroplasts are located. And that's where we're going to photosynthesize, where we're going to convert carbon dioxide, water, and the energy of sunlight into sugar, glucose, and oxygen. So let's go ahead and begin our diagram. We're going to start by drawing the upper surface here. And I'm going to use red, and this is going to represent a waxy surface on the top of the leaf. And this waxy layer has a very important function. This waxy layer is going to be referred to as a cuticle. And it is a waxy layer. And its main job is protection. The greatest challenge that any land organism has, whether that be an animal or whether that be a plant, is going to be dehydration. We don't want that. So this layer of wax is going to help protect us and seal us from dehydration. Now, I'm also going to have that layer of wax on the lower surface, but it's not going to be quite as thick. And if you think about that, that makes perfect sense, because where is the light, where is the sunlight most intense? It's going to be most intense on the surface. So we want the thickest layer of wax there. And we want a thinner layer down here because we don't want to waste resources. Wax takes energy to actually make. And we don't want to make more of it than we actually need to, right? Because that would be a waste of resources. Also, if you think about climate, those plants that live in hotter or drier climates tend to have a thicker cuticle. Now, let's go ahead and draw some additional cells in here. And there's going to be a layer of cells right underneath this waxy layer. And in fact, this waxy layer was actually created by these cells. And these cells are your outermost layer of cells. They're going to be called your epidermis. Remember, epi means above, or on the surface of. And the main job here is going to be protection against dehydration, protection against germs. Now we're also going to have that layer of epidermal cells on the bottom. And I'm going to draw it sort of discontinuously. There we go. And you can see that I've left spaces here. And I'm going to erase a little bit of that wax there because we don't want it blocking our space. There we go. And the hole here is called a stoma. Plural would be stomata, so all three of these would collectively be called stomata. But the stoma is a hole here, and it's got a very important job. Its job is gas exchange. We're going to let gases in and out. All right, so gas exchange, let's write that down. The gases we're going to exchange here are CO2, carbon dioxide, in, and oxygen out. Remember, CO2 we need for photosynthesis, and oxygen is going to be a byproduct. It's going to be a product of photosynthesis. We're going to want to get rid of it. And also coming out of this hole is going to be some water. And that's going to be important. We'll talk about why that is in a later video, but we need to have water come out of this hole in order to transport water up the plant. Now, On either side of a stoma are going to be specialized cells. So I'm going to go ahead and make these cells specialized. So they're there. And these specialized cells here are going to be referred to as guard cells. Because what they do is they guard the opening there. These guard cells are capable of increasing in size or decreasing in size as needed. Now think about that. These cells are going to increase in size under certain conditions. If it's really hot out or if it's really dry out, we don't want these holes to remain open because we'll lose too much water. Dehydrate, that's a bad thing. So these cells are going to swell up under hot, dry conditions. And maybe in the evening or when it's cooler or more humid out, these cells are going to shrink up because there's less danger of dehydration. And we need these cells to shrink up now and then because we need to have CO2 get in for photosynthesis. So a very important balance the plant needs to strike there between having these cells seal this opening and leave the opening open. All right, now let's talk about what's going on in here. A lot of important things going on in here. I'm going to go ahead and use a green marker because it's sort of befitting here because the cells in here are going to be involved in photosynthesis. So let's go ahead and draw some of these cells. There we go. And notice how these cells are kind of lined up right next to each other. All these cells collectively are going to be called the Palisade Mesophyll. Now palisade means that the cells are side by side. And mesophyll, meso means middle because that's where they're located, in the middle of the leaf. Think of the leaf as kind of like a sandwich where the upper layer and the lower layer are going to be your bread, and everything else is going to be the filling here. So meso means middle, and fill means leaf. So middle leaf. Now, these cells are full of chloroplasts. On average, they contain, 50 or so chloroplasts, give or take a couple. And the same thing would go over here. And down here, we're also going to have mesophyll cells, but they're going to be arranged in a different pattern. All right? They're going to be sort of haphazardly arranged. And they're actually going to kind of look spongy in nature. There we go. And the collection of these mesophyll cells is referred to, just as it should be, spongy mesophyll. And they also have chloroplasts in them. Now, we want this to be spongy down here. We want nooks and crannies down here because this is where the gas is going to diffuse in. We need to have that gas diffuse into our cells in order to carry out photosynthesis, because that's one of the reactants. You might say, well, why isn't this spongy up here then? Well, we want to pack in as many cells as possible up here because this is where the sunlight is going to be most intense up here. So we want to collect, kind of like solar panels, we want them side by side so we can collect as much sunlight as possible to power photosynthesis. So again, the plant needs to strike a balance between sponginess and how many cells we pile up next to each other here. And the balance is like this. We want as many cells as we can to collect sunlight, but we also need a certain amount of sponginess because another reactant here needed for photosynthesis is gases. Now, a couple other things here is you might see some tubes running transversely here across the leaf. And these tubes, sometimes you might see a little bit of the tube here, and they kind of look like that. You might get another tube in here, kind of looks like that. And these tubes are going to be vascular tissue. This is the vascular tissue here. or we could call it a vascular bundle because that's what it is. It's a bundle of vascular tissue. This is xylem and phloem running through the leaf to deliver the needed materials to the plant. And that is going to be it for our dicot leaf.